Athlete Builder, we're back at it, and I'm in the library, and today we got Bill Parisi. So similar story, similar background. Started his strength and conditioning world on his own, basically out of his garage. So did I, and he's a little bit further along than I am. My gym's just coming up on 12 years. He's been in the business since early 90s, and so just some perspective for all our listeners out there. So some numbers just to get a little familiar with Bill. Another All-American, two-time All-American thrower. We had Zach Riley on. He was shot and discus. Now we have a javelin thrower, but he hails from the East Coast and from New Jersey. Went to Iona, and by the time he's done, everything's all said and done, he's staring down the Olympics and trials. So he made it pretty darn far in his world, and then from there went on to Florida as a GA there, and was working with other athletes, and then not much longer starts his business, Parisi Speed School, which has been by all metrics outstanding. Over 120 facilities currently, over 600 plus coaches since the early 90s. Easily, they have touched over a million athletes where they help them improve. Some other numbers for context: 130 NFL draftees. Even coached a guy that ran a time in the 4.2s. So Bill's been around. I like the way he describes himself and how he got started, and how he kind of like sums it all up. But we're gonna get into that. And shout out Chad Coy right off the bat because he connected us. Because Chad's a master coach for Parisi. So we have the founder on today, Bill Parisi. Bill, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jim. Yeah, looking forward to chatting it up.
For sure. Now, we were just talking about this before we got started. How do you guys describe yourself, the East Coast Jersey guy?
Yeah, describe myself as a guy that not supposed to throw the javelin too far. North Jersey, 5'10" Italian, and we were not, genetically made to be great javelin throwers. We were probably made to be good bricklayers or chefs in the kitchen, right? Or we get in the garbage business and do high interest loans for cash.
Right. All on the Sopranos, right? Now, I'm hoping that Chad ends up dialing into this episode, and if I tell him that we mentioned him early on, there's a good chance. So I've known Chad a few years, but I think you guys go back a little bit further. So if you have any dirt, now would be a great time to lead off.
Yeah, well, Chad, we go back over just about 20 years now. But I will say about 10 years ago, Chad was transitioning from an owner into some other aspects of the business. And we were at our annual summit. He was pretty fired up. We had our annual summit that year at Disney World, Wide World of Sports. And we put a big flag football tournament together amongst all the Parisi facilities around the country. And we had teams, and coaches were on different teams. Chad was on my team. And it was flag. I don't know if Chad got the memo that it was flag, but Chad was lighting people up to a point he was pissing people off. And he continues to say to this day, he was just, following the rules of offensive line play in flag football. So we still bust him about that, but it was a lot of fun. It says one thing about Chad. The man is intense. The man is all about the competitiveness, and he's all about winning. So that's why we love having Chad. I'm very fortunate to have him as a full-time team member of the Parisi corporate organization, and he runs our whole business development side for us.
Nice. Not all of our listeners have really seen him, I don't think, or can really understand him. I love how his traps go from his ears to his shoulders all the way to the outside.
Like Herschel Walker.
Right, Herschel Walker, exactly. Yeah. And he's about my height. I'm just under 6'3". He's maybe 6 foot, 6'1", 240 pounds, and he is just dense, right? Dense person. And coming straight at you, and right, he's intense. And it's, as you know, in the speed school, force equals mass times acceleration. And he's bringing all that force and intensity. So I can absolutely see that. Yeah, you're right. You said I'm an Italian from New Jersey. I'm 5'10", and most throwers, they're 6'4", 6'6", long levers.
long levers. Yeah, yeah. I had to defy the odds, and the javelin throw is to do it well. I had good fortunes. I was good at it. I mean, I developed myself to be good at it, and that really took a lot of training and athleticism. So to throw far at 5'10", you got to run pretty fast down the runway. You got to transfer all that linear speed into ground reaction force by stopping yourself on a dime.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a right-handed thrower, you're jamming your left leg into the ground, creating this massive braking force, and you got to transfer all that ground reaction force from the left leg plant, through your hips, through your core, through your torso, through your lat, your shoulder, and then ultimately into your hand to create hand speed. So you need speed, you need strength, you need uh, mobility, you need athleticism, you need timing,
Balance.
all these, balance. Yeah, you need all these attributes that it's what I studied, for myself for a good part of 10 years of my life. Was going to clinics and seminars at 17, 18, 19, 20, which led me to go to Finland when I was 20 years old to go and compete and train with some of the greatest athletes in the world. And then I started going to seminars and educational events around the world. When I was an undergraduate athlete,
Mm.
so I was in audiences with other strength coaches back in the late '80s. I went to a seminar with the head strength coach of the New York Giants. He hosted a seminar. Angel Spazov was there. Angel Spazov was the head Bulgarian Olympic lifting coach. The Bulgarians used to win all the Olympic medals back in the '80s in Olympic lifting, and they probably knew how to facilitate or use drugs better than anybody else back then, but they were great technicians. So going to these seminars, going to these clinics as an undergraduate athlete and applying them to my own training really was the foundation that the Parisi Speed School was built off of.
Gotcha. Would it be safe to say that your education level was a bit higher as an undergrad than other athletes and also other strength coaches that you were around?
Yeah, I mean, because I was applying functional training, back in the '80s and '90s for my sport, and I just saw, hey, this makes a lot of sense. I remember when Penn State, they were doing one set to failure, they were doing high intensity, hit training, where the industry's really come around. But still a long way to go, I believe. I think we still live in the sagittal plane way too much. Understanding omnidirectional submaximal loading to affect the fascia and connective tissue system, I think is where it's at right now. I think we overplay muscular training. Not that it's still very important. You still need to be strong in the squat and the dead, but I do believe kids start that at a young age, which is not a bad thing. But doing that for multiple years, 7, 8, 10 years, you can develop some challenges in the system and limit your abilities. So I mean that's a pretty deep rabbit hole we can go down, but the point I'm making, being a former javelin thrower athlete, being an athlete that needs to use every aspect of their athleticism to take advantage of ground reaction force, because ultimately that's what we do in sport, right? We need to maximize the ability to take advantage of ground reaction force, whether that be to sprint or change direction or throw an object or catapult our body into another individual to make a tackle or a play or to box somebody out. It's knowing how to transfer ground reaction forces and create your body to become, very stiff for moments in time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say stiff, I really mean stable, kind of like your body becomes a statue of steel for milliseconds when you want to box somebody out or when you're trying to block someone on the offensive line. You got to know how to create these dynamic pulses of your body becoming very rigid
Mm-hmm.
for very short periods of time. And that takes a combination of contractions and muscle relaxations. And it's an interesting form of athleticism that I've done a fairly deep dive into to really enhance performance and create higher injury resiliency.
So many, and I make a lot of mistakes like everybody else does. And when you're earlier in your career and younger, I'm making more. And with building speed, it's easy to forget that you still got to stop. When you're running down to make a tackle, you might have to stop and then turn left or turn right or at an angle. And so the deceleration is critical too. And if you don't build that component, tears are coming everywhere. And we had Dr. Klutwijk on. He's the knee doctor for seems like every athlete in the Midwest, but specifically the Colts. And he's talking about injury rates, and there's a lot of travel sports. There's a lot of activity, and the strength isn't there for the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments, and then we have a lot more ACL tears. And it's not running straight. It's all the change of direction, and it's going to take a toll, and the body has to be prepared for it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is, defining strength, right? There's the absolute strength, there's the strength of the tendon, the ligaments, because those things can improve their strength. They actually can improve their size.
Mm.
There's research out there that shows, preseason female soccer players, the thickness of the ligament, the ACL ligament, it actually thickens with training. So it's not only traditional strength, but obviously eccentric strength, but really the timing of the ability to co-contract, and that's more of a bottoms up approach or dynamic systems approach, as Nikolai Bernstein from the late Soviet Union, and the concepts of teaching your body to be more responsive in the unpredictable environment of sport. And I feel that's the missing element with most training programs today is um, training is way too predictable
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, so it doesn't really prepare you for the unpredictable. So there's ways to develop the neurology and the fascia, and to me that's the missing element. It's neurology and fascia. Now fascia is highly neurologic, where it has 8 times more the proprioceptors than muscle, and utilizing this sensory organ, which is considered, it's now deemed the largest sensory organ in the body, larger than the skin. This highly neurological, proprioceptive rich system is a big player in injury resiliency and facilitating protective aspects of our athleticism. So I really feel um, it's something that is the next really big frontier to training.
We hosted a summit with prior podcast guests at my facility this summer, and Dr. Klutwijk brought one of his sports athletic trainers, and she had a real nice drill with people. So the guy's like in this bull ring, and he has to go to these different numbers based on where the ball is thrown. So he has to watch the ball and then react. And then she's behind him, so he can't see her. Then he has to react again. And then we changed it to different noises or sounds. So he has to connect those dots as well. You can see the athlete thinking, and when you're running down to make a tackle, there's thinking. You're looking at all these different angles on a kickoff. Where's everybody else at? Where could the person go? Where's the boundary? Is he decelerating or accelerating? What's going on? So you're making these decisions all the time. And then basketball, same deal. You're running down. Are you going to be able to block the shot, cut off the pass, stop the dribble, whatever? And so the neurological component is obviously a critical factor because that's what sport is. It's rarely just static like in powerlifting, where it's just
Yeah.
down and up. Everything else, there's so much motion and movement involved that their neurological component is uh, a huge piece, and it's easily overlooked. But also, once you start to get into it, pretty fun to evolve.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so the neurology obviously is a huge component, and then you've got the connective tissue, the cellophane wrapping that wraps every muscle cell and groups of muscle cells and entire muscles. Talking about the endo, epi, and perimyosin. This wrapping is cellophane, kind of fascia, collagen, and ground substance, with proteoglycans, glycosaminoglycans, hyaluron, that make up this mixture of kind of wet cement in our body that has rebar in it that really gives our muscles its integrity, because muscle without fascia is chopped meat, muscle without fascia is pulled pork. And understanding how to train that fascia tissue is really the difference between a farm kid and a city kid. If you had two wrestlers and one grew up on the farm, one grew up in the city lifting weights in the gym, and one grew up, baling hay and working on the farm, the odds are, and if they were the same weight and same technical aptitude, the odds are the farm kid's gonna win. Most people bet on the farm kid. He's got that farm boy strength. He's got that kind of that mason grip, when you grip a mason's hand or
Mm-hmm.
construction worker. There's something different about him, and now we know what's different about him is their whole life they loaded their system omnidirectional with some maximal loads. They didn't like live in that sagittal plane, squat, dead, bench.
Right.
They did lots of other movements, and now we know those movements facilitate this quote unquote cellophane wrapping, to give your body more structural integrity. It's no different than why you wear a weight belt or why you wear knee wraps when you might want to get a bigger squat, or what have you. It's to create more compression and tension, and that's what, when you train fascia correctly, that's what it does to the body. And so it's a big element of training that I think is really powerful.
We just had another testimonial to that. I think because 2 weeks ago we had Jeremy Hartman with Hartman Strength and Speed. So he's national champ in powerlifting and competed internationally, and he trains a lot of student athletes now. But I asked him, how long you've been lifting, and what gave you your edge? He goes, it was pure luck, pure luck. I'm in sixth grade. My buddy is a sixth grader. His older brother would train with his dad in the garage, and so then my sixth grade buddy would train also, and then I would go down there with him. And so I go, what would you guys do? He goes, well, this guy, he made his own sleds. And so for sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, we did a lot of sleds, a lot of sandbags, a lot of carries, a lot of hauling stuff. Up and down, side to side, just hauling stuff. He called it farm boy strength, just like you said. He said, so when I get to, high school and they introduced the barbell, it was really pretty easy. It was really pretty easy. Everyone thought I was just gifted. I had just done these years with this guy down the street with his two kids. Two kids now are wrestling coaches at University of Iowa, so they're pretty decent. And so, if anyone knows Iowa and wrestling, the history is outstanding. Um, well, I had a question more specifically. I'm looking at your history and your timeline. You go right out of school and into like working with athletes, and you're even studying it in school. I didn't know where I was partying on some weekends, and I changed my major a few times in school. Like, how did you know, or come to the realization early on that, I want to work in this world and I'm going to go all in, because it's hard to understand who you are at such a young age, let alone what you want to be. But it seemed pretty crystal clear that, hey, you know what, this is the world I'm going to work in, and I'm all in on it.
Well, I was all in at a really young age, and my biggest defeat became my biggest opportunity. So I was an undersized, high school football player, played offensive line at 5'10", 180, and
Mm,
linebacker.
mm,
And we still did pretty good. I was the MVP of my team. We went to the state finals, and in football. But like early on, the coach said, "Hey, you need to get faster to if you want to, be a good linebacker." And we ran the Delaware wing tee, so the guards pulled and all that stuff. So I wasn't that fast, not great genetically. Went out for track, got faster, but didn't, not fast enough to be a running back or a receiver. But the coach had me try the javelin, and that's what kind of prompted me. And my senior year, I was pretty good at the javelin. I had a Division I opportunity to go compete at the Division I level in javelin. Football was Division III, but I went Division I. But the setback I had in high school was my senior year. I was a top 10 thrower in the country, and I got invited to the junior nationals. It was a national meet. First time on an airplane. It was in Chicago and Elmhurst, Illinois, 1985. And the top two place finishers make the junior Olympic team. And that year they were going to Tokyo, Japan,
mm.
to represent the U.S. And I was pretty fired up. We the school put a fundraiser together to get me out there. I went out there, and I was in second place with with one thrower and one throw left in the meet. I was all fired up. I was thinking about that red, white, and blue USA sweatsuit,
Mm-hmm.
and I was excited to be on the U.S. team. And I got beat on the last throw of the meet by 2 inches.
Mm.
So that was a defining moment for me. And I said, I'm never going to let something like this happen to me again. I'm always going to be, more prepared. And that was where I went on the quest. And that quest led me to Iona College because the head track coach there was a unique situation. The head coach of track and field at Iona was Division I program, was a field events guy, Tony Niclario, a big javelin and shot and disc guy. So I went to Iona, and I decided to go there last minute. They didn't even have my major. My undergrad's actually in finance. So I went there and learned a ton from Tony. It was great. And that's where I went to Finland for a summer. And I went to all these clinics. And he was a nationally acclaimed coach and got right into it. I actually took over the Iona College weight room. I redid it for them. And I was just all in at a young age. And then went on to, compete and was a two-time Division I All-American my senior year. Unfortunately, I blew out my ankle. Could have been three-time All-American, but senior year didn't work out because of an injury. But at that time, I still competed with a really, I had my ankle taped up. It was bad. It was because I qualified for the NCAA's in the first meet of the year. But anyway, the meet ended, and the winner there, Tom Puskis, who was an American record holder, went to multiple Olympics. He was a University of Florida athlete. In my senior year, my ankle all taped up at the NCAA's. I didn't make the finals because it was just a bad meet, and I was injured. I said, I want to move down and train with you and come down to Florida and work and train. I'm not giving up yet. So that's how it started. I went down to Florida. It was Steve Spurrier's first year of coaching. Just left Duke, and I cold called Steve Spurrier and asked for to be a GA. For the football and track teams. He said no at first, but I persisted and eventually got that opportunity the spring semester of that year, and took anatomy, took physiology, took some courses down there, and that's where it kind of all started. But that was sometimes your biggest setback is your biggest opportunity. You don't get better always succeeding, right? You get better when you are challenged, and that challenge really led me to do bigger and better things. So that was an interesting opportunity and learning experience being down there. I was actually awarded the head strength coach as an undergraduate of their track team back in '91. We had 3 Olympic athletes on that team, and it was great to oversee the strength and conditioning for those athletes at the age of, basically I was 22, 23 at that point, and started gaining some great experience at a young age down in Florida.
How was a number of questions now, there's plenty of follow-up. How was the decision process for you? Because you're 21, 22 years old and can still throw. Your ankle is going to heal. You're going to be able to have that fixed, and you can still try to qualify, 88, 92 Olympics. There's a time though when you decide, hey, no longer will I go through all the things to compete as an athlete. I'm going to compete through other folks and get them better. There's that transition. So how did you make peace with that? How did that come about?
That's a great question, because I hurt my ankle in '90, and we didn't have the imaging equipment that we have today, and it actually to this day it never truly healed.
Mm.
And basically my it was an entrapped nerve is ultimately what it was, because of my tibia kind of just rolled forward on my talus when I planted, and I slipped on a runway, really flying down the runway, and then my cleats caught. So it was like planted, slip, and caught. So my talus actually, my tibia actually rolled forward and entrapped a nerve. We know that now, but there wasn't anything really structurally wrong in terms from an X-ray standpoint, but it was a nerve entrapment that caused like like a knife was going through my Achilles,
Mm.
basically when I planted and tried to throw. So it was crazy painful. But anyway, the reality of that, the injury kind of was one thing that kind of made me decide, okay, I need to probably, hang it up and go on to other things. But the other thing too was, just you got to make money, right? I mean, ultimately, and competing in the javelin, if you're not top 10 in the world, you're not making money, right? That's one of the things that you got to be, top 10 in the world to make any kind of money. So that was a driver, being realistic about getting on with my life and ultimately, you know, delivering or sharing everything I learned as an athlete, sharing with other young athletes, aspiring athletes, and coaches. So that was the big driver for me, just to kind of take that next step to really create a career and a plan.
Yeah, yep. That is a reality, right? Not all athletes are paid. Now, a lot of them are paid more now than they were way back then, obviously, especially with the NIL money. But that's a reality.
Yep.
You have bills to pay, right? You can't just be floating along forever. And it's
Yep.
completely evolved. Now, youth sports, and you train youth to be healthy, well-rounded, decent, exceptional, elite, all different calibers, right? I have some parents that come
Yep.
to my gym. They want their kids. They're homeschooled, and they just want their kids to move well and be healthy and well-rounded and in shape. Fine. Some are hoping that their kids will play varsity in high school. Some are hoping beyond that they have a shot. So there's different levels of structure and effort. With the and everything evolves and there's trends and everything changes. Youth sports. What are two things you've seen change for the positive in the last 10, 20 years, and two things that you think, oh, this is really going in the wrong direction? What's one or two on a good
Yeah.
side, one or two that, hey, well, I'd like to make a change here or an improvement because it's going the wrong way?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, I think the on the positive side, I think kids now are getting um, access to training, which is good,
Mm.
where they didn't have it in the past. And I think the training is slowly getting better and better. Um, and I also think the the information out there, it's slowly becoming I think more robust and beneficial. There's a lot of misinformation out there, so it's kind of like a double-edged sword. So the training, the fact that kids are training more, that's good. But in some ways, it might not be good because I think a lot of injuries occur in the weight room. I think a lot of injuries occur with kids actually training incorrectly.
Hmm.
Um, I worked, closely with guys like Stuart McGill and really understanding uh, the risks that kids have with poor lifting mechanics. And I don't think a lot of people truly understand really dialed in, squat technique, hip hinging mechanics. And I think a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on really, locking in the lumbar spine and maintaining a neutral spine. And I think it's an epidemic in high school weight rooms where injuries are occurring every single day where they don't even know it, where they're slowly delaminating that annulus fibrosis, that collagenous network the you know around the vertebrae, between the vertebrae, that encompasses the nucleus pulposus of the disc, the lumbar discs. And I feel that just so many kids are putting undue stress in that area that eventually catches up to them over time. So I think the fact that we are training more and getting instruction is great, but I also think the downside is, you know, that we could be doing more damage than we think we understand. That we even know when we're doing these things, and that's the challenge. The best ability is availability. At the end of the day, I mean, I've heard of a lot of different horror stories where kids are out for the season or they're out, for a couple weeks because they're injured and it maps back to the weight room in different capacities. And some people don't even realize that it's mapped back to the weight room. But it shows up because that when they made that diving catch, or they were out there blocking, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That was the final piece of collagen that just ripped open in the lumbar spine at that point in time. But that was getting weakened for the last 6 months through undue stress on that collagenous network. I mean, always think about training muscles and getting the leg strong and lifting and getting stronger. Well, how about the connective tissues? Are we going to sacrifice the strength of connective tissues to get muscles strong? That doesn't make sense, but that happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That happens a lot with strength training, where people sacrifice the integrity of the connective tissues to get muscles strong, and we're not addressing connective tissues. We're not focused on connective tissues, and we have to be, because that's really the separator. You know, when you look at real dynamic athleticism, you know, you look at natural burners, you know, they don't tend to carry a lot of muscle for the most part. When you look at your wide receivers and defensive backs, you know, your cheetahs, you know, those guys are more tendon and connective tissue driven. And, you know, the thing is, you want to be careful on how you train athletes, and you got to look at their genetic makeup, right? What's their genetic drivers as an athlete? Are they a muscle-driven athlete, or are they more of a connective tissue-driven athlete? So your tight ends and linebackers and fullbacks are more muscle-driven athletes, and your wide receivers and your defensive backs are more your cheetahs, you know, more your connective tissue-driven athletes. And, you know, obviously, you know, all systems are in play in all athletes. Everyone is leveraging connective tissues. Everyone's leveraging muscle tissue. But when you look at, you know, you look at athletes out there, you look at the greatest football player, one of the greatest, the Colorado defensive back, his name, wide receiver, slipped my mind. It'll come to me, but when you look at some of these just freak of nature athletes, they're not very muscular.
Gotcha.
And what can we learn from that? Now, I'm not saying everyone should be like that, not at all. No, what I'm saying is, what can we learn from that? You know, what's driving their athleticism? Now, could athletes like that use more muscle? Sure, I'm not saying you don't want to put muscle, but you got to be very careful, because if you do a lot of traditional loading with those guys, you could throw off their natural ability to create dynamic pulsing stiffness. And that is the essence of athleticism. You know, the ability to co-contract and create, you know, pulsing strength. Like a world-class sprinter, when their foot hits the ground, you know, running at top speeds, it's generating 5 times their body weight of force in 8/100ths of a second. So when you have a 175-pound sprinter, you're generating, you know, 600, 700 pounds of force in 8/100ths of a second. There's not an exercise you can do that repeats that type of stimulus. And when you think about generating that kind of force in that kind of time, it's a lot more than just muscle. It's a symphony of systems, specifically the fascia system and the neurology. So, you know, that really helps facilitate those co-contractions of pulsing strength. That is a unique strength that's trainable, and that's why some of these cheetahs have incredible ground reaction forces without necessarily being, you know, weight room monsters.
So on the one hand, I can't remember the guy's name either. Plays for Sanders. He's the only two-way player out there, and
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
clearly fast, clearly dynamic, clearly athletic, explosive, can jump, cut on a dime, tons of speed. And
yeah,
so on the one hand, it's, you know, if I'm listening, and you know, it kind of reinforces the idea. Well, people are just born that way, right? People are just born
yeah,
that way, and I'm like, well, yes, people are born that way, but if that were true, and that's the only way it gets there, then your whole school's mantra is Not true then, right? Because your school is speed is a skill. You could teach it. So there's a very, very small, when I say very small, I mean thousands of a percent that are born that way. But for everybody else,
Yeah,
they
and
can get stronger, they can get faster, they can build the fascia, and they can build up their overall muscle strength and ligament and tendon strength. So there's still the way to, and then there's the mindset that goes along with it, the knowledge of how to play. Like Luke Kuechly wasn't maybe the
yeah,
fastest, but one of the smartest linebackers out there, always in position. So what I want to, there is hope of building athletes, not just being born that way.
yeah. The name it's Travis Hunter. I couldn't think of his name.
That's right.
Uh, the the two-way player for Colorado, which everybody who follows football knows who he is. But the point is, I remember I have a son that he plays college football. He played for Don Bosco. Now he's at Delaware. We competed at a pretty high level 7-on-7 tournament at IMG when he was in high school, and Travis Hunter was at that tournament, and I saw him very close up, and obviously he stood out back then. I think he was probably going into his senior year, or even maybe going into his junior, maybe going into his junior year. It was a while ago, and yeah, I mean, just obviously gifted and different, but you can just see how lean he was, right? I mean, extremely lean. Um, but really able to generate this strength, right? I mean, it's like playing against wiry basketball players that are boxing you out, and you look at them and like, how is this guy so strong underneath the basket?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
and he's not a guy that's squatting 400 pounds or 500 pounds. He's not bench pressing a lot of weight, but he's got this unique strength about him, and that's because he knows how to use his neurology to create co-contractions of muscle pulsing stability, right? Um, and to me that's trainable.
Right. Right. That there is that's what the hope is. There you can learn it, you can teach it, and you can absorb it and apply it. What your coaches are doing all the time. And you don't take someone to the combine. I don't care how good you are and run a 4.2 without any kind of training. If without any training at all, you're just going to lean forward and go in a 2 point stance. Probably not. Right. So there is shin angle. There's a lot of things that go on there to maximize because 4 seconds is over pretty quick. You got to be
Yeah,
everything's got to be dialed in there. Um,
yeah,
I get accused a lot. People say, "Well, Jim, you just love strength all the time." I go, strength helps build speed, and speed helps building strength. And athletes need typically all of it. They need to build some, depending on the athlete's
yeah.
job. Sometimes you need some muscle on your body just to be able to absorb the hit, right? Just
No doubt.
just to help insulate your body. But talk about how speed builds strength and strength builds speed and how they're um for I don't know spouses in the body.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, no doubt. I mean, I think first off, I mean, if you want to reach your speed potential, you got to squat 2 times your body weight. I mean, that's an underlying, foundational uh, component. Bill Kramer, when I wrote my book Anatomy of Speed, I interviewed a lot of just world class guys. Bill Kramer was one of them. Dan Path and just guys, Franz Bosch, all these different guys. Um, I've worked with over the years or had the pleasure to attend their events and get to know those guys. But Bill Kramer, did a lot of research and ultimately 2 times your body weight is that magic number. So you definitely, that is the number one indicator of speed is relative body strength. How strong are you
Relative to your body.
compared to
Yep.
your body weight? Now, once you get over 2 times your body weight in the squat, now the jury's out. Do you really need it? And I'm a believer most people don't, So, but now listen, that means if you're, 300 pounds, your goal is 600 pound squat, right? That's not easy,
Right.
But if you're 175 pounds, you don't need much over 350. I mean, you don't need to be worrying about breaking 400 if you're 175, or if you're 200 pounds, a 400-pound squat is still is a big squat,
Mm-hmm.
So those are good numbers to go for. So that is still an important factor. probably one of the most important factors in determining speed. But once we get to that level, but now where else do we get it from? It's really from the neurology and the fascia, and getting that free energy from the stored connective tissue, the tendons, and fascia, and knowing how to really time it up, right? So speed is really timing as well. So when you create force into the ground and you're generating ground reaction force, a lot of athletes tend to over push. Their foot strikes the ground, they're still trying to drive, through the ground. Now, in acceleration, the first couple strides, that's important, and that's strength based, right? We know how important strength is for acceleration. We know the research tells us out there how world class hammer throwers and shot putters, they're neck and neck with world class sprinters in the first 5 to 10 meters,
Right.
in that first acceleration. But after that, then it's over. Um,
It is.
and the elastic energy takes over after that, and then once that foot hits the ground after the acceleration phase, now it's when it hits the ground just becoming a stiff pogo stick and bouncing off the ground, not so much trying to push through the ground. That's the last thing you want to do, and a lot of injuries can occur because of that. Kids tend to overstride, get an anterior pelvic hip dump. They get too much of a sway on the backside mechanics. Really causes athletes to overstride, overextend, and a whole host of issues come about when athletes just have the wrong mindset and they overpush. But I see that as the biggest mistake. Athletes are over pushing, over driving in that transitional phase out of acceleration into top speed.
Gotcha. Yeah, people don't realize the power, especially like Olympic weightlifters. But you'll see those guys; their vertical jumps are enormous. And
Yeah,
same thing with powerlifters too. They're great right out of the blocks if they know just a few things. But like you said, that is absolutely where it ends. And a lot of those guys, they don't want to run more than 10 meters.
yeah, and 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 the rate of force development, the concept around what velocity based training does from that intent and that neural drive, just the neurology of the brain, the thought process, the competitive nature of lifting for speed, is a game changer. And so it's not absolute strength is one thing, but how fast can we generate that strength? And that's where the rate of force development and velocity based training is really a game changer for athletes, because the research really tells us it's that intent. It all comes down to intent and the ability to really contract and fire and take advantage of that neurology. And I think that, to me, when you talk about the big things, I think that is the next big thing that I think more and more high school weight rooms and young athletes, once they get exposed to, is going to really raise the ceiling for a lot of athletes in their future. Diving into VBT and really understanding and owning it with good mechanics. I think that's a game changer. And I don't, more and more athletes are using VBT, and it's still new to the younger population. But I think it's a really big game changer.
you know, like anyone else, there's tendencies. Coaches have a tendency to they want to run the ball, they want to throw the ball, or the pitchers are always throwing fastballs, not that many change ups or breaking balls. People have these tendencies, and coaches are guilty of it as well, even strength coaches. And you'll find some, hey, well, I want my guy super strong, and I have other coaches that I talk to. It's all VBT, it's all velocity based training all the time. They don't want to raise the absolute strength number, and it galls me that people just hang their hat on one thing. So even when I'm
Yes.
talking with Tom Barry, who took over for Louis Simmons out of Westside, a powerlifting gym, and people had this misconception that Louis was all about absolute strength only. And he's talking about athletes. He's like, no, you got to have the speed strength to go along with that. So my argument has always simply been, if you need to be a certain level of absolute strength, get there. If you need to be a certain level of speed strength, get there also, and a certain level of size to play your position. But what does everybody else look like on the field the last 50 years at your position? You should look similar to that. It's not going to be all just one thing, and you're talking about the stiffness of your connective tissue. Well, you have to work on that as well, right? So I think where coaches make big mistakes is they'll say, well, there's only one way. It's my way. It's this philosophy that I have, and this is all we're doing. And I'm like, well, how could that be just one way? There's one component does all the work. All the components are critical. Everything matters.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I feel, when you have that mindset, it makes programming more difficult.
Yes.
Um, you have to put more thought. It's definitely not a linear mentality. And it just takes, quite frankly, it takes more mind share and intellect to incorporate these other things. And maybe coaches don't want to put the effort in to really expand their thinking. But there's no doubt um, that the concepts of VBT, velocity based training, and neurology and the fascia system, they're all intertwined. And if you're not looking at these areas of training, omnidirectional, submaximal loading, types of training along with the speed of movement, you're completely missing the boat. And I think you're doing a disservice to your athletes. And I think you're doing a disservice to yourself. I mean, there's so much more we don't know than we do know about this industry and about training and about uh, changing the organism and how we manage stress to it, how we manage the different loads. There's a lot still to be learned out there, and you got to be on this constant quest. I'm on a constant quest. I mean, I'm connected with a lot of very highly acclaimed individuals like a Keith Barr, who's done an extensive amount of research in connective tissue and tendons and ligaments out of UC Davis. Robert Schleip, a German scientist in connective tissue and fascia. He's probably top 3 published scientist in connective tissues. This guy's like Stuart McGill, who's done a tremendous amount of research in core stability in the spine, and all these, Peter Weyand out of SMU, who's started his research on speed development back at Harvard back in 2000, and then Ken Clark, who's another top researcher who got his PhD out of SMU because Peter left Harvard to go to SMU, and he's put out a ton of research. So I look at all these guys, all their research, and I've actually pieced different studies together to come up with my own conclusions. So there's research that Stuart McGill has, Peter Weyand, Keith Barr, all these top researchers from different universities, Waterloo University in Canada, Harvard University, SMU, UC Davis, connecting connective tissues, connecting neurology, fascia, and come up to my own conclusion on how to really optimize and develop speed. So it's not one viewpoint, it's not one system, it's not one researcher, it's multiple researchers and putting together a puzzle of their research. I actually linked it together, so it was kind of cool because I had a couple of them on a call together. Some of them didn't even know each other or knew of each other's research, and it was kind of cool having those conversations and piecing things together. So every coach should be on that quest to kind of find that ultimate solution, which ultimately you'll never find, because there's never perfection, right? There's no such thing as perfection in anything. But the pursuit of perfection, right? That's mastery, right? The pursuit of mastery. You never truly master anything. It's the constant, never-ending pursuit of mastery and pursuit of perfection. And that's what drives me every day. It's always searching and not changing my philosophy or changing my paradigms, but how do I adjust? How do I grow and learn more to add to my belief systems? And if something's challenged my belief systems, that's good. Let me see why I might be challenged. Let me see why I could, look at things maybe a little bit differently, and then make those adjustments accordingly. But having that mindset, I will say this. It's been a pleasure because the last couple months I had the pleasure to go and lecture for UConn men's and women's basketball. I was just at the University of Tennessee, did some educational in-service for all their strength and conditioning staff for all sports. University of Delaware did a big in-service for those guys. We're talking to Oregon, talking to LSU. So we're definitely, it's exciting to see some of the most prestigious universities with the top sports teams really, really dive in and want to learn more about some of the things that are really changing the game.
I think first and foremost, if you don't have your obvious humility that you seem to have, you're not going to go out and challenge your beliefs or look to learn new things. You're going to be like, hey, I like Jim Windler's 5-3-1 method, and that's the only thing I need. And I'm just going that route, and I'm good to go. If you're constantly humble, then you're open to learning new things because your ego is not isn't in jeopardy. Hey, it's okay to be unaware or wrong even because I'm going to learn some more things, add it into my head, and turn out a better product, for the athlete. When you talk about all the different permutations, well, there's just different athletes all on the same field, all different positions, in which case their body is designed differently and respond or need different things, right? So not only do you need to know what to do for an athlete, but you also it changes per athlete, and that same athlete at 20 is different at 35, and so you got to make some more changes all along the way. And so there's that constant, once you're comfortable thinking, hey, I got this guy figured out, we're doing fine. You're like, oh shit, well, looks like I was off on that one a little bit. Gonna have to readjust. One of the things I
Yeah.
asked you about on mindset, I want to make sure I say this correctly. So, but essentially was always deliver more than expected. Having talked with Urban Meyer, one of his mantras was everything you do plus two. Run through the line, do 2 extra reps. Don't just understand the homework, really master the homework. Talk about how that philosophy funnels down from you into your affiliates and your coaches.
Yeah, I mean, success is really not that complicated. It's just hard work.
Mm,
People, it's funny because I've had the good fortunes of working with thousands of coaches over the last 35 plus years, helping coaches, educating them, motivating them, giving them best business practices. Um, I mean, we have a facility in Fair Lawn. It's the only facility in the world. It's been around for 25 years. And for 25 straight years, we've been doing youth performance in this facility. And for 25 straight years, we've averaged $1 million of revenue every year for 25 straight years. There's no other facility on the planet that has done that in youth sports performance. Now, I've been in business for 35 years, had other facilities that we grew to that facility. We opened that in 2000. And so we grew to that facility. Our first facility is in 92. And the goal is to always over deliver. And that's how we were able to build, and I don't know if anybody has any other facilities out there that's been in business for 25 years that have averaged. Now, there's years we've done 1,200,000, 1,300,000. There's years we've done, 800,000. But we've averaged $1 million every year for that long time. And I say that, and to answer your question, is constantly over deliver. And how do we over deliver? Well, it's not just with the training science. They're not just giving them great programming and great prescriptions and great periodization and great velocity based training or great speed drills. It's really mastering that delivery. And my example, and a lot of times I say to people, if you were to have a barbecue at your house and for Sunday football and you were going to have people over and you were going to cook some burgers, would you go to McDonald's and buy those hamburgers, or would you go to the butcher and get some really great chopped meat and make your own burgers and put them on a grill? I would think the answer is pretty simple. You're gonna go buy your own hamburgers. I mean, can you imagine having people over? You can serve them McDonald's hamburgers. I mean, that would be an insult. That would be a good way to lose probably some credibility in with your friends or loved ones, right? You kind of they're probably saying they don't really think much of me serving McDonald's. Then if you're so good at making hamburgers and better than McDonald's, why don't you compete? Open up a hamburger shop right next to McDonald's if you're that confident and people get confused and I say, yeah, you know what, the product is very important and you got to have a great product, but what's just as important is that delivery system. McDonald's has a delivery system. Now their products aren't great, but people know what they're getting, and they get it for a value that they feel that the value that they pay is good. They get a good value. Now I'm not promoting McDonald's. I don't eat McDonald's. I'm trying to make a point here is that you got to serve a filet mignon, but it's got to be consistent, right? That delivery has to be great. It's like going to a really nice steakhouse and knowing what you're going to get, but at reasonable prices. So the point I'm making is the delivery. The delivery of your product has to be dialed down. And when you have really, really strong delivery, I mean, I know there's people out there that have incredible delivery and their content might not be great, but they're still successful, because they have just incredible relationships they build with their athletes and their coaches, and their people. But, when the rubber meets the road, you really got to have both to be sustainable, right? And I feel that's what kept us sustainable. For me, and being in business now over 30 years, and having facilities that have been around for 25 plus years. A lot of people, this is a very transient industry. A lot of people get burnt out. A lot of people can't figure out how to make a true living. I'm proud to say coaches in our facility, the Fairlawn facility, been there 15, 20 years. They come in as interns. Now they're married with kids and have houses, and they're still coaches for us. And that's the difference. It'll be interesting to see how many facilities understand how to develop a corporate culture and infrastructure where you maintain coaches. Now, I've had coaches that have started with me and went on and do great things. Guys like Martin Rooney, Joe DeFranco, they all started with me. And spent 5, 10, 15 years with me, which is great. God bless those guys. I still have relationships. They're still good guys. But the point is, if you really want to be sustainable in this business, you got to set a standard. And you got to set a high standard for yourself. You got to set a high standard for your organization. It starts with core values, your core mission. What is it that you're looking to, how you're making an impact in this industry, and people gravitate to that. And some people are going to go on and ultimately do their own thing, which is great. And other people just don't want that risk. I mean, talk to a lot of people that went out and did their own thing. There's a lot of people now that I see and are really good coaches. They're burnt out. Like they're having kids. They're still running the grind and running the business. When you get in your 40s, I know a lot of young bucks that came out, spitting fire and piss and vinegar and just on fire, and they get burnt out over that time. And it's knowing how to build sustainability, and that comes down to your culture. It comes down to your product, your delivery, and really knowing how to address these things with your team.
Well said. That's excellent, Bill. Sustainability is probably one of the words we have to strive for when we're coaching adults, kids, whatever. People will talk to me about their nutrition, and they'll say, "What about this carnivore diet or Whole30 or intermittent fasting?" And we'll say, "Can you keep that up for 30 years? Can you keep that up for a long time?" And they're like, "Well, I want to just lose it real quick." I'm like, "Go somewhere else, man, because you're going to lose it quick, and then it's going to come back on. It always does. If we're easy, right? It's not easy. It wants something sustainable. Well, I want to build this. I want to be a D1 athlete. All right, cool. Are you willing to do all the things that are sustainable? I want to train really hard. I'm like, was that sustainable? Can you do all these things? So when you talk about your product and how it's delivered and the core values, you see your philosophy everywhere at some point when you're so dialed in. So when I talk to athletes or coaches, I'm like, you can have the right mindset, core values are locked in. You're working really hard, but if you're just running around in the circle, you're not getting better, right? So you have to have the knowledge of how to be better, right? And then even if you're Mr. Know-it-all and you're working really hard, if you're an asshole and no one wants to talk to you and you can't work with people, well, there's a limiting factor. Your teammates. Those are the three things I talk
Yeah.
about in their head. And that's why you probably saw those questions on the questionnaire. Then your physical, on your body. Well, I like to train really hard. Well, you blasted yourself on Monday. You couldn't come back and train till Thursday. So
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
recovery's off and your nutrition is off. So those things all matter too. It turns out to play at the highest level, the reason is just such a small percentage because you have to do everything, right? And
That's
so everything is that same percentage. As the limit approaches X, everything is that percentage. So it all matters. So this one other question I had for you is, I always ask, the guests about the three things for your head and the body, and I usually get broad answers that are meaningful, like like you said, over service, and that was a 5 minute answer, which is very meaningful because there's a lot to it, right? However, this is very rare. So I have a nutrition question here. What are one or two things that have been critical for your nutrition? And you are very specific. 15 grams specifically of collagen and 50 milligrams of vitamin C. Not 16
one hour.
grams, not 75, nothing, not like, hey, have 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, blah, blah, blah. Why so specific there? Why are those important to you?
That's just directly from Keith Barr's research, and I've seen patella tendinopathy in NBA player. It's a research study, patella tendinopathy in an NBA player, and how that um, supplementation by ingesting collagen 1 hour before training, specifically different forms of isometric training, but also different forms of tendon connective tissue training. Your body produces more collagen to make your connective tissue stronger. It's called mechanical transduction, and that is facilitated through different forms of resistance training and isometric training. But the science shows that ingestion of collagen and vitamin C combined together 1 hour before training is going to help facilitate, the the anabolic effect. I shouldn't say anabolic, but the spooling of more collagen, because collagen is spooled through fibroblast cells, little spiders that spool collagen, because collagen, it's a non-living, the fascia and connective tissue, for the most part, 90% of it's non-living. It's like hair and nails. It's non-living. It's collagen. It's a protein, right? It's a non-living protein. And that stuff we can make, through mechanical transduction, through stressing our body in a certain way, through triggering the fibroblast cells that are living, that are like little spiders or slugs that crawl around our body, millions of them everywhere, and spool collagen based on triggers, based on stressors or lack of stressors, right? So if I sit in a long period of time, if I'm sitting in a chair, or if I'm an accountant working at a computer all day, well, over the years, I've got massive amounts of collagen that's webbed together, kind of like felt, where the collagen goes in every direction, and there's no elasticity to it. It's like carpeting. It's like locked in, and now you're locked down. It doesn't have good, transport of fluids or water or oxygen, and all the muscles begin to get stiff and whatnot. Well, if you train correctly, collagen's going to be spooled in a way where it's a 55-degree lattice angle. It's going to be springy, and it's going to be more elastic. And that spooling of collagen through mechanical transduction through the fibroblast cells is also facilitated through collagen ingestion. So that helps that to happen, and helps it to facilitate the healing effect and the development of stronger collagen. So anyway, that's why I recommend it. I think it's really important, and I think it's one of the missing links in injury resiliency.
All right, fair enough. I'm sold. I'm gonna start telling my athletes that dosage, and we're gonna work with that. So another Monday night of continuing education, and that's an easy takeaway amongst the others. So that's super easy. So man, I appreciate it. Thanks, Bill. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
These last rapid fire ones. What do you listen to? Nothing. What's your bucket list adventure? Nothing. I'm doing it right now. All right. And then, I know you're a New Jersey guy, Italian, but the Philadelphia, what's your favorite movie? Rocky. Favorite sport and athlete? You said football and Mahomes. I thought you might pick someone older. You're all about your favorite is the current guy, the current buck in the saddle right now.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that because I got to know Bobby Stroop pretty well over the last couple of years now. I've done some educational events with Bobby. He's been training Patrick since he was 9 years old, and I just everything that we do and stand for, Bobby has done with Patrick, and just created probably one of the greatest athletes ever to walk a football field, and how we can manipulate his body and what he does. So it's been really great to kind of see what he does and follow him and whatnot. So a lot of credit goes out to Bobby. Him and I have collaborated, and in the last year or so, and doing some more stuff together. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's great. That's great. Favorite book?
Well, this one was one I read in college, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I mean, Dale Carnegie.
It's classic.
I mean, yeah, it is a classic, and I just still comes back to, just be more interested in other people. First seek to understand before you try to seek to be understood.
True. That way you're giving first and not just
Yeah,
looking to take.
yeah.
Favorite superhero? Back to Rocky. Which is your favorite movie? The first one?
Oh yeah. Rocky One is the foundation, but although Rocky Three rivals it. Now, when that came out, I was probably about 10 years old, and when I first saw it, when it first came out, and yeah, it was 9, 10. It was like 10 years old, 76, 77, and then all through high school, the Rocky movies were coming out.
Hmm.
So that was for me, that was like right in my very impressionable time when
Sure.
those movies were coming out, the original movies, and it's like the underdog, and I was an underdog in a lot of ways, and that was inspiring to a lot of people.
For
So,
sure.
um, yeah,
Favorite villain?
I yeah, I put the Karate Kid, the original movie came out too when I was in high school.
Right.
So
You can
I,
see the
I always
similarities
like
here.
I always like Doc Crease,
Yeah.
and that made a comeback right on
Right.
Netflix, Cobra Kai. So again, I was in high school when those movies came out, Karate Kid, classics, and Doc Crease was always a great villain, uh,
Yes.
and that was always fun to watch. So those movies were just classics.
Sweep the leg, finish him.
Yeah,
Right. But
yeah,
Elizabeth Shue, I was sold on that movie when I saw Elizabeth Shue for the first time, and I thought, all right, this is going to be outstanding. And in the end, the guy wins and he gets the girl, and I was like, oh man, I must start. I need to move to California and start doing martial arts or something like that. Favorite lift?
yeah, yeah. I put push-ups, and I like because I like training alone in my basement. I like just because I'm always communicating with people, and I'm always out on, always on,
Mm-hmm.
and just body weight stuff, Viper and tidal tank movements. So I do a lot of fascia related type movements. Viper is a tool. Michel Delcourt, he was a Canadian strength coach about 20 years ago, and working with his hockey athletes. He was a hockey Canadian strength coach, and went up to the hockey coach. How are my guys doing? You got to get them stronger around the puck. It's like, okay, got them stronger, bigger bench, bigger squat, got them stronger in the weight room. How are my guys doing? A few months later, still got to get them stronger around the puck. Who's beating my guys? The farm kids. And that was the invention of the Viper, which is basically a bale of hay you bring into the weight room that doesn't create the mess. So it's a 4 foot steel kind of rubber tube that has come different weights. Phenomenal program. Michelle and I have collaborated on a lot of things. A brilliant guy, brilliant mind. Uh, and then tidal tanks is another water filled bag that creates perturbations for the system that really allows the body to be more prepared for the unpredictable.
Right.
So having water inside a bag and you're doing different movements with the water, your body has to naturally self-organize to create stability.
It,
And that's a component of dynamic systems training theory.
your brain's constantly having to assess and decide, make decisions, and then the core to the extremity component with your strengthening your core from all the sloshing around. It's
Yeah,
outstanding,
and the nice thing is it's not a conscious thought. Like, so the
right?
body's self-organizing. You're not thinking about how to stabilize. Your body's just doing it, and that's what these tools bring to the table. That's to me, that's the big game changer.
You know, says favorite way to train is barefoot and alone. And the East Coast guy, it sounds a lot, a little similar to Zach Evanesh. He's always squatting barefoot, and people ask me about that. And I said, it's so you can grip the floor a little bit better. Or some people like the mindset, hey, I'm this Viking out there doing it as well. But there's different components, but there's legit reasons to do it. Some people just simply like it. Um,
Yeah, and the feet. Like, listen, you can't be a strong athlete if you have weak hands. You can't be an explosive athlete if you have your weak feet. Weak feet, and if your feet are in shoes all the time, you're always training in shoes or cleats or sneakers. You gotta let your feet splay. You gotta work all those perennial muscles, all those dynamic stabilizers of the lower shank and the foot. And I'm not saying go train your whole session barefoot, but you should do a little part of your warm up barefoot. You should do something barefoot. Not that you have to go and do everything barefoot or squat barefoot, but just gradually, yeah, get some barefoot training in somewhere somehow.
True. Favorite quote?
Life is a gift. You make it precious.
I like it. We're only here once. You're only here once, and gotta go now. Gotta go now is what I tell
Yeah.
people. So make an impact, legacy, etc. Bill, it's been great having you on. Learned a lot. Some things I'm gonna have to go back and re-listen to and digest even further. So there's homework. So appreciate the time. Just stay on here for a few minutes after we hang up. But where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, our website, parisischool.com is something, but Bill underscore Parisi is my handle on Instagram. Those two things are the best way to connect with me, either through the website or Bill underscore Parisi, and then also at Parisi Speed School is our other handle, and I have some people that are managing that. So that is a good way, and we put a lot of content out, on a weekly basis on those channels. So that's definitely an opportunity to take advantage. And our fascia training academy.com is another website, another organization, education we do in fascia training. Fascia training and application is another one, website that we have. But if you Google fascia training application, fascia training academy, you'll see us come up there.
Awesome. Awesome. And like always, for those that are trying to get a hold of us, info at athlete-builder.com. And athlete-builder.com is the website. Both my books are available there now. They're in pre-sale up until Thanksgiving. The Triumphs of Transformation, that's the one I collaborated with the other 30 authors on overcoming adversities. But my main book, Athlete Builder, the blueprint for building champion athletes, that's out there for pre-sale now. So pick up a copy and send it to a coach or a parent of an athlete. Bill, again, thanks for staying for the time today. Thanks for the gift of your knowledge. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad Chad connected us. It was a lot of fun. So let's hang on here for a few minutes,
Yeah.
but I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me.